Possibly you have listened to chapters 1 through 3 of the narrated story, Shadows on the Trail. I would like to chat with you about the story so far from a skeptical perspective today. We are going to analyze a section of a hiking narrative from the perspective of someone, me for instance, with extensive experience in outdoor activities, someone who has spent years hiking, woodcrafting, and hunting. Our goal is to critically examine the events in the narrative, paying particular attention to logical fallacies, emotional influences on perception, and providing alternate explanations where necessary. This analysis will help us better understand how our minds and emotions might distort our interpretations of the world, especially when faced with unusual or frightening experiences in the wilderness. Chapter 1. Shadows on the Trail. Event 1. The Mysterious Footprint. Analysis: Sadie and Bart encounter a large, unusual footprint near the stream. Sadie suggests it could be a bear, but the print doesn't quite fit the description of a typical bear track. Possible fallacy: appeal to ignorance. This fallacy occurs when something is assumed to be true simply because it has not been proven false. In this case, the print isn't immediately recognizable, so Sadie and Bart start speculating about possible explanations, e.g., maybe it's a bear or maybe it's something else. Alternate explanation: the footprint could easily belong to a large human or animal with unusual characteristics. It's not uncommon for large animals, even bears, to leave odd tracks depending on the terrain, moisture, and their movement. Lack of immediate recognition doesn't necessitate supernatural explanations. Think about this. What's the danger of making assumptions in the absence of concrete evidence? How can we teach ourselves to look for logical explanations first, rather than jumping to conclusions about unknown phenomena? Emotional influence. Sadie's curiosity and Bart's cautiousness introduce a subtle emotional tension that could affect how they view the footprint. This suggests that fear or curiosity might cloud their judgment, influencing their decision to leave the footprint unexplored. Both of them seem unsettled by it, but they don't discuss it openly, which can heighten the psychological effect of an unexplained situation. Suggestions: a more balanced response could have involved analyzing the print more thoroughly and seeking more evidence, such as looking for more tracks or confirming if there were any nearby signs of large animals in the area. Chapter 2. The Encounter Event 2. The Clacking Noise. Analysis: Sadie and Bart hear an eerie clacking sound deep in the woods and grow anxious. The source of the sound remains unclear, which causes them to escalate the situation and make assumptions about it being something threatening. Logical fallacy. Availability. Heuristic. This is when people make judgments based on the most readily available information or recent experiences. Since Sadie and Bart have already encountered an unsettling footprint, they are primed to assume the worst when they hear the clacking sound. Their minds are likely focusing on the most terrifying possible explanation. Alternate explanation. The clacking could be anything from the sound of a bird pecking at a tree to an animal interacting with the environment in an unfamiliar way. The woods are full of unknown sounds, and many of them could sound menacing but be entirely innocuous. Think about this. How do past experiences shape our perception of new, unexplained events? Why do you think Sadie and Bart immediately assume the noise is from a dangerous animal, rather than considering the possibility of something less threatening? How could they manage their fears more effectively in such a situation? Emotional influence. Fear plays a significant role in how they interpret the sound. Their anxiety is heightened as the clacking continues, leading them to assume it's from a predator. Their increasing sense of dread leads them to start running and making decisions based on heightened emotions rather than a rational assessment of the situation. Suggestions: to avoid reacting emotionally to potentially innocuous sounds, they could stop, listen more carefully, and examine their surroundings for any signs of danger. Event 3. The Rock Throwing. Incident analysis: Sadie and Bart find themselves in a clearing, encountering something that throws rocks at them. They mistakenly identify the creature as a bear, only to later realize it wasn't. Logical fallacy: false cause. This occurs when one event is assumed to have caused another without proper evidence. Sadie and Bart conclude that the rock throwing must be related to the creature, and they infer it was trying to harm them. However, they lack evidence that the creature actually threw the rocks, and the possibility that the rocks were thrown by another source, like falling branches or animals, is not considered. Alternate explanation: the rock throwing could have been caused by natural phenomena, such as falling rocks or branches snapping in the wind. If there was indeed a large animal nearby, the rocks might have been coincidental, not intentional. Think about this. Why is it important to consider multiple possibilities before drawing conclusions about the cause of an event? How does fear influence our interpretation of ambiguous or unexplained actions? Emotional influence. The increasing tension between Sadie and Bart heightens their perception of danger. They interpret every movement and sound as a direct threat, which makes it difficult for them to remain calm and think critically about the situation. Suggestions. In high-stress situations, it's crucial to take a step back and analyze the evidence before reacting. Trying to stay calm and methodical, such as checking for other possible sources of noise, could have helped them avoid misinterpreting the situation. Chapter 3. The Decision. Event. 4. The Bigfoot Reveal. Analysis: Sadie and Bart finally confront a massive, hairy creature in the woods, which they assume to be a Bigfoot. Logical fallacy: argument from incredulity. This occurs when something is assumed to be impossible or untrue simply because the person cannot believe it. In this case, Sadie and Bart conclude that it must be Bigfoot because they cannot think of a more plausible explanation. Alternate explanation: what they saw could have been a bear, a large person, or even a misidentification of an animal in the shadows. The mind can sometimes amplify fear, leading to misinterpretation of ordinary sights in the dark. Think about this. How does the mind interpret fear? Why are we more likely to believe something is supernatural or impossible when we're afraid? How can we avoid jumping to conclusions when confronted with unusual or frightening events in the wilderness? Emotional influence. The intense emotional response they experience, fear, panic, adrenaline, leads them to attribute the creature to something they've heard of, Bigfoot, because it fits the narrative they already have in their minds about mysterious forest creatures. Fear, coupled with the unknown, can greatly influence their perception and their narrative. Suggestions. It's important to remain level-headed and try to recognize common animals or natural occurrences that might be misinterpreted. The best approach would be to gather evidence, example, taking note of the creature's size, movement, and the sounds it makes, rather than leaping to conclusions. Conclusion. As we can see from the analysis, the events in these chapters are heavily influenced by emotional responses, fear, and the availability of certain explanations. By maintaining a critical, logical perspective, characters like Bart and Sadie might be able to assess situations more rationally and avoid jumping to conclusions that are based on limited information. Think about this. How can fear and anxiety cloud our judgment when we encounter the unknown, particularly in the wilderness? What are some practical methods for remaining calm and critical when faced with strange or terrifying experiences outdoors? How do logical fallacies like the appeal to ignorance, false cause, and argument from incredulity shape the way we perceive and react to the world around us? This concludes today's chat on the role of skepticism and logical thinking in wilderness experiences. Get out there, have fun. If you experience something, think it through.